What is up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel where I basically just talk shit. I just yap. That's what I do on here. No real well thought out, concise, planned speeches really given on this channel. It's all me just off the dome, baby. That's the way I do things. So this is the Corey-Austin theorem, where I talk mainly about 7-hydroxy, Kratom, the influx of that into Western society. Over here, now obviously a lot of states are starting to ban, in particular, the 7-hydroxy, but to my knowledge, most places are still allowing the Kratom powder itself. And that leads me, is a perfect segue into what I'm going to talk about today. And what I'm going to talk about is it controllable? Because really, that's the looming question that all of us on this channel are entertaining, right? Because whether you've had what you would consider an unhealthy relationship with Kratom, and or have developed or had developed in the past an unhealthy relationship with Kratom. Well, let me start off by saying 7-hydroxy, I'm never going to make an argument for that being used wisely. I just think there's no way to use that wisely. I think it's just no bueno. It's bad news. Something that has been that upscaled and that adulterated is too freaking strong. It's like shooting H in your arm, literally. It's that bad. So I'm never going to advocate necessarily for that. Although I'm sure there are some people out there that have the ability to use it wisely. And I'll use this as an example. One of the things that got me introduced to pain pills, it was that my mother took them because she had had several back surgeries that caused her chronic pain. And I remember, I would take my parents' pain pills. Not proud of this, by the way. It's just part of my history with addiction. And I've since talked to my parents about it and apologized. And my mom and I have kind of had a conversation or two about it. And she has said to me, I understand how there's a difference in some people, because she had been taking pain medication for years. But when I finally went through some therapy and recognized that, this particular shit, I can't control this, right? Her and I had a couple of conversations, and she said, well, I realize that there's a difference because I'm dependent upon these pain medications because I need them to manage my pain, but it's never crossed my mind to just take more and more and more and more and more in one day, you know what I mean? It's never crossed her mind to like updose, I'm not saying she wouldn't at times take 2 when she should take 1 for the most part, sort of thing. But she took them as prescribed. Had she not, she would have been running out of them every month. So it was never some sort of temptation that she had to resist not taking an overabundance of something like pain pills. So it's just different people it affects in different ways, right? So in that same vein, I'm sure there's someone out there that could potentially take 7-hydroxy and just not abuse it and just take it every once in a while, and it's not a big deal if they don't get some more until later on. But I think those people are far few in between. I think the majority of us, certainly if we've found ourselves introduced to it and are taking it on a regular basis, I think for the most of us, we're just getting high off of it and we just like it, right? So that's why we end up on it. And when you're taking it for that reason, you're always going to try to tend to go overboard with it, because once that feeling goes away, you're chasing it again. That's the whole thing of addiction. That's the whole cycle of the addiction and the physical dependence. When the feeling goes away, people who are addicted go and chase it again. People who are not addicted might be like, okay, well, if a wild hair gets up my ass next week sometime, maybe I'll take it again. It's not like I have to have it again immediately after it wears off, and even science can't really explain why some of us are just built different in that way. But back to my original. Whether you have had a negative relationship in the past with Kratom powder, or whether you have not had a bad relationship in the past with Kratom powder, there are going to be a set of people who are going to attempt to still take it and control it, right? Now, obviously, there's a set of people, particularly the NA, the AA communities, would very, 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 very strongly oppose that anyone that has identified themselves as having some sort of substance abuse issue ever try to take something like Kratom powder successfully, right? But guess what? Not everybody is in NA. Not everybody is in AA. Not everyone is going to adhere to and agree to that, whilst it may be in their best interest for a lot of people who abuse substances to go to the AA or NA route and become 100% abstinent. Guess what? It's just not going to happen. And it doesn't matter how right they are, or how right they think they are, or how wrong they are. People are always, and there are always going to be a group of people or a set of people that, I don't care, I'm gonna live my life, man. I'm gonna live this life once, as far as I know, and I just want to do what I want to do. So I don't want to live abstinent. I still want to be able to use stuff. I like Kratom. I still want to be able to use Kratom. Yeah, it's caused me some problems in the past, but whatever. You know, I still want to be able to use it, and that's always going to be that way. So that's what this video is about. And my channel is not about necessarily taking a really hard stance against something especially like Kratom powder, because I think it can be used way more responsibly than the extracts and stuff like that. And so I will support the idea that there are just going to be people out there that are not going to give it up altogether and they want to use it. But it is also clearly something that you have to respect, because if you don't respect how you use it and use it somewhat responsibly, that's when you'll find yourself in this dependency sort of situation where you start having really bad withdrawals if you try to stop taking it and all that stuff, right? But what I can do for you guys is revert back to some of my earlier and earliest use with Kratom powder. And to be honest, I went for quite a while. I'm talking the first couple of years of using it, and I was using it pretty responsibly. And I wasn't really having any negative side effects in terms of withdrawals and stuff like that because I was using a fairly small amount every day. I was only using it 2, maybe 3 times per day. It wasn't like I was just every couple of hours just shoving down more. And I went for a pretty long period of time where it really didn't bother me. I thought I was in a good place with it. I didn't have any reason to really feel like I needed to stop. My health was okay, all these things. And where it switched for me, and which is actually what caused me to start this channel several years back now. Damn, getting a little nostalgic there. This channel's been going for a little bit now. A lot of you guys have been following me from the beginning, and now here we are, almost 2,000 subs. Speaking of, perfect segue. If you enjoy this sort of content, please do subscribe to the channel. That helps the algorithm a lot to send people over here. But anyway, aside from all that, back to the topic. So what really turned it around for me and why I started this channel was I discovered the extracts, the liquid extracts, like the MIT 45s and stuff like that. Prior to that, I had only been taking the powder, and I didn't really have a problem with the powder. I had never really gotten to a point where I was taking an ungodly amount. I was definitely taking less than probably 15 grams per day, sometimes maybe less than 10 grams per day, and I had been going like that for a couple of years. Then I effed around and found out when I tried the MIT 45 extracts. And then once I got that high, then I was like, whoa, I'm getting higher off of this. Let me start using these. So then once I started using those regularly and I put the powder away, that's when it got to a point after several months where I was like, nah, this is too much. This is too much. And then I tried to stop taking it a couple of times, definitely noticed some pretty serious withdrawals. And then from there, I tried and failed to just kind of go back onto the powder from that. But what I realized is, now I've built my tolerance up. Now my tolerance is way up here. This is way different than the powder. So then when I tried to, make what I thought was a lateral move back over to the powder, I was like, shit, in order to, meet this amount of, metrogeny intake that I'm bringing on board every day with the powder, now I'm going to have to up the powder. So the little measly 10, 12, maybe 14 grams of kratom powder that I was taking every day, now that does not translate to where my tolerance actually is. So when I go to switch back over to the powder, I find that I'm having to take 25 grams a day of powder just to not be in deplorable withdrawals coming from this MIT 45, right? Withdrawal. So that's really where I messed up. And before that, I was actually in an okay place, I thought, with kratom powder. And the way that I did that was a little bit of mixture of everything. Like I took a little bit of kratom throughout the day, but I never really took it past a certain time in the evening for the most parts, except maybe on the weekend. I might take it a couple times in the evening, but I'll take it first thing in the morning, then at lunch, and then I wouldn't take any more until I got home that afternoon. Get off work at 5. Sometimes, I go home. A lot of times I'll do a 30-minute workout, then I'll shower. So there were days where I would take my last dose for the whole evening and whole night at 5:30 in the afternoon. Sometimes it will be a little later because I would work out, then shower, and it will be maybe 7 o'clock. But again, my last dose before that would have been right around lunchtime. So you're looking at 11:30, 12 o'clock, and then I'm going all the way till sometimes 5:30, 6, even 7 o'clock in the evening before I take it again. And then I don't take it again the rest of the evening, and then I didn't take it at night. And I didn't need to. I didn't have any withdrawals at night. Like, my body was used to it. I was okay with it. I had never taken it at night enough to where my body became dependent upon that nighttime dose. So I never really noticed any sort of withdrawals in between my doses, but that's something that is more beneficial if you start out on kratom and you just stay on the kratom powder. Because when you switch over and you go to something heavier and stronger like the MIT 45, then your need for the powder is going to upscale, just like your tolerance has upscaled on the MIT 45s. Okay, and then at that point, it then becomes hard to go back to the powder. So you almost have to get to a place of like what I've done recently, where I came off of the 7-hydroxy and have just been off everything for a while. Like right now, if I were to start taking powder, I could probably take 8-10 grams per day and would be perfectly fine and would have no withdrawals, and I could probably keep it that way. My only fear is that that will cause me to then be tempted later on to go to the extracts and stuff like that, because you get a bigger buzz that way, to be honest with you. But that's one of the ways. And during that time too, like, I wouldn't drink a lot, but on the weekends I would. So in the evenings, so that I didn't have to continue to updose on kratom and stuff like that, I might have a couple of drinks. The way I would do it is a couple of shots. I know that's too intense for some people, but I was never big on, beer. It's very fattening. And then if you think about a mixed drink, you're putting all this high sugary juice and high fructose corn syrup with like Sprites and stuff like that. You're mixing all this stuff together. I don't like the calories. What I'm after is just the alcohol, something to take the edge off. And then so I would do a little bit of that maybe in the evenings, on the weekends specifically, not during the week, but on the weekends. And, maybe take a bite of some little legal THC gummies that I got from the head shop, to get myself a nice little cross, I guess you could say, kind of poly substance sort of buzz, but not too much of anything, You know, I'm not the type of person with, oh, let's take 10 shots, or, you know, let me take 10 grams of Kratom at one time and then let me eat 2 gummies. And just, no, it's, you know, I'm a person that I kind of like to microdose on different things, you know, and get this little cross conglomerate sort of buzz. And I lived like that for a couple of years, and I was completely fine with that, and I didn't notice any real negative side effects. And then I graduated to the MIT 45s, right? Well, you got to remember, during this time as well, when I was living this way, I was also eating healthy. I was also exercising regularly. I'm a person that does cardio, you know, HIIT workouts. If I can't do a HIIT workout, I'll go out and jog, you know, when the weather's nice. So I'm a person that stays in pretty good shape and in pretty good health physically. And during that period of time, I was also doing those things, right? So I just think it's one of those things where you have to be really careful, and you have to know yourself, and you have to know whether you are a person that could potentially handle that sort of relationship with something like Kratom, right? And that's just what you have to do. You have to be able to be honest with yourself. And if it's one of those things where, you know what, I really have shown that I can't control it all that well at times, I admit that, but I like it. And you know, this is my last chance to control it. If I can't control it this time, I just got to hang up the Kratom gloves, so to speak, and retire, you know. And some people are going to try to go that route. And I think that it is possible for certain people to get to a point where they're just like, yeah, I'm out of all my favors to myself. So if I want to use this substance, I have to be able to hold myself accountable. I have shown and proven too many times that if I do not hold, you know, if I'm not vigilant and I don't hold myself to the utmost accountability or standard of accountability with this substance, then I'll go down that hole again to where you do not want to go, right? And I do believe that people can get to a point of, well, I've come on and off of this 8 times now. It's clear that I just have to take it a certain way, and there's no other way to take it. And then there are people that claim to be able to go back in, kind of, you know, edit some things that they do of how they use Kratom and stuff like that, and then get to a point where they're okay with it. You know, there's people that kind of go overboard a little, then come back, then they'll get off and stay off for a little bit, go a little overboard with it, come back, stay off a little bit, like, okay, well, I don't need to take the extracts, obviously. I don't need to take the 7-hydroxy, obviously, but I think I'd be okay with just some Kratom powder or something, or a Kratom tea every once in a while or something, you know, something like that. And there's people that do that. And I don't judge people that do that. And I've always said, I never say never. I definitely will never use 7-hydroxy again. I'll never use an MIT 45 again, but because I think that they're just too adulterated and they're too close to those traditional street drugs in the intensity of the high. And when you get to that point, it's just scary. It's just scary. And Kratom powder is one of those things where unless you just take a really, really huge amount of it, you can get some pretty decent benefits off of a relatively small amount of Kratom powder. And if you just kind of keep it there, you also can typically go and not really, you know, develop any sort of real physical dependence. I mean, you can, especially at the higher amounts, but if you keep it within a certain, you know, 10 grams, by example, 10 grams per day or less. You know, maybe a limit for you is 12 grams per day or less. Anything that or smaller, you may be okay, and you may never really have any negative consequences to come along with it, right? But you also have to do the other things in life to keep your body healthy. You can't be a sedentary, overweight person who has emphysema and smokes cigarettes, never exercises, eats unhealthy as shit, high sugar, high fat, high everything, carb diet, and then also add on to that, start taking 20 grams, 30 grams of Kratom every day, your system, your digestive system, and just your system in general is going to become overrun trying to process through all of this shit that you're putting in your body on a regular basis, and then you're not working it off by exercising. So you just get this compound effect where your body just starts to get behind and is always trying to play catch up, and then you're not getting vitamins and minerals that you should because you're just overrunning your body with toxicity, right? But I do believe if a person lives an otherwise healthy existence, eating healthy, exercising regularly, taking a modest amount of something like Kratom, still making sure that you're staying hydrated throughout the day, all of those things, I do believe that people can use it responsibly, somewhat wisely, even if they do have a predisposed kind of propensity for going a little hard in the paint on, you know, substances like that. I do believe it. I believe it. And so that's for those people. If you're one of those people, you just can't decide, and yeah, maybe it's caused me some problems, but I'm not ready to give it up, then I feel you. I understand. Everybody's been there, and I think that there are some people that can, you know, fall into the category of, at least at one point, abusing the substance and finally getting to a point where, all right, I'm laying down the gauntlet. If I'm going to use this stuff, and I really do want to, I want to still be able to have it in my life, I'm going to have to set and stick to certain parameters to myself, for myself. And that's just good choices, and that's just good cognitive behavioral planning, you know. And you have to know your triggers, you have to know your limits, and you have to be able to implement them and have some discipline in doing that. Because if you can't, the shit's just going to overrun you again, and then you're going to find yourself right back at square one. We already know that about this substance, and we already know that about the people that tend to abuse substances like this. We make poor choices at times. Have to get better at that. If you can't get better at that, and if you can't get better at the discipline it requires to maintain and control some measure of, you know, normalcy with the way you use Kratom, then you just better not touch it at all. Just don't touch it at all. And you have to know. You have to do a little self-reflection. You know, be honest with yourself about that. All right, I'm going to stop rambling. If you've enjoyed this sort of content, please do subscribe to the channel. I would definitely appreciate that. Look, you can also hit this thanks button. I want to cut in right here. I spend my time on this. Time is money. Do I need the money? My wife and I are very blessed. I already have money, but I still like money. So if I've done anything for you, this channel's done anything for you, don't be afraid to toss me a couple of bones. You know, I'm good. Could always be better. You know what I'm saying? Again, subscribe, comment, let me know where you're at, like the video, do all of that stuff. And I will see you guys on the next one. Thanks so much for watching. See ya.